Can you imagine being a Ferrari pilot, prepare your car for days with millimeter adjustments, and discover that someone inside your own team sabotaged everything without you knew? That was exactly what Lewis Hamilton lived in the GP of the Netherlands. But why did it happen? Who is behind? And most importantly, are we facing a civil war in Ferrari? The 2025 Netherlands Grand Prix had begun as another weekend. Zandvoort, with his technical layout and her passionate fans, promised track action and perhaps a resurgence of Ferrari, who urgently needed to consolidate the performance of the SF25. Lewis Hamilton, in just his third career as a pilot of the Italian team, was confident. During Friday's sessions, the car had responded solidly. The telemetry was clear. There was balance, braking stability, good load transfer, and above all, a level of trust between the pilot and his car that had not been seen since his best times in Mercedes. Each lap felt progressive, calculated, sharp. Everything suggested that Saturday would be a key day to position himself well in the classification and opt for a podium. But that expectation was broken abruptly. On Saturday morning, just when going on track for the third free session, Hamilton knew that something was not going well. The car was no longer the same. Each curve became a survival exercise. The rear was slid without warning, the braking became unpredictable, and the corrections were constant. What seemed like a minor variation became a structural problem. And the pilot, with more than 300 major experience awards, perceived it immediately. The question in his head was inevitable: what has changed? What was discovered later, thanks to a cross-technical analysis between Hamilton and his engineer Riccardo Adami, left every ice cream. Two key parameters of the SF25 had been modified without authorization between Friday's closure and Saturday's start. In Formula One, each millimeter counts. Each Newton-meter of force is the product of hours of simulations, predictive models, and precision work. And here, those values were altered without knowledge of the pilot. First, the rear conduction height, originally set at 58 millimeters by Hamilton and Adami after hours of track tests, was raised to 62 millimeters. A seemingly subtle change, but that radically transformed aerodynamic distribution and diffuser efficiency. This simple adjustment broke the harmony of the airflow, affecting braking stability and causing curve inputs, something that no elite pilot can tolerate if you want to be at the limit. The second adjustment was even more sensitive: the preload of the differential. It went from 85 Newton meters to 75 nanometers. This modification completely altered the way the motor torque was transmitted to the rear wheels during acceleration braking transitions. What was previously a soft and progressive exit became an abrupt and unpredictable transfer. The car began to skid in critical areas, especially in curves such as 9 and 10, where Ferrari already suffered historically. Hamilton had to constantly fight with a car that he did not recognize. These changes not only annulled all the work of tuning and free training, but they committed their safety and confidence. And the most alarming thing is that neither Hamilton nor his engineer were informed of these alterations. The decision came from a superior entity within Ferrari, something that we will analyze later. The consequence on the track was devastating. In the classification session, Hamilton was erratic, wasting time in sectors where it had been competitive hours before. The car did not respond, and its body language inside the cabin said everything. In the race, the lack of traction and the unpredictable behavior of the car led him to the limit. Finally, that limit broke and Hamilton ended out the Grand Prix, leaving behind a disconcerting scene. A world champion, frustrated, without answers, and a team that could not explain what happened. But this story does not end there. What seemed like a technical anecdote became a formal complaint. Riccardo Adami decided to raise his voice. Not as a gesture of rebellion, but as an act of technical and professional responsibility. He did not only for Hamilton, but for the integrity of sport. Because in Formula One, trust between pilot, engineer, and machine is sacred. And in Zandvoort, that trust was broken from the inside. If there is an element that has begun to disturb even the most veteran members of Ferrari, it is the growing influence of an entity that, although it was born with laudable technical objectives, today seems to have become a parallel power within the structure of the team, the so-called Central Performance Group. This unit operates from Maranello, thousands of kilometers from Paddock, in a controlled environment, surrounded by advanced simulators, latest CFD modeling, and artificial intelligence systems that predict the behavior of the car in different scenarios. But there is a key detail: they are not on track. They are not there when the car plays asphalt, when the wind changes, when the pilot feels that something is not going well. Originally, this technical cell was created with a clear intention: to enhance the decisions of the team on track through real-time data analysis, anticipate changing conditions, and offer recommendations based on thousands of simulations. It was a support tool, nothing else. But over the years and management changes, this unit gained power. Its autonomy increased, and slowly he began to make decisions directly, sometimes even skipping the natural hierarchy of the team on the track. In Zandvoort, the Central Performance Group was the one who ordered the modifications to Hamilton SF25. There was no prior consultation. There was no technical debate with Riccardo Adami. There was no notice to the pilot. Simply, orders came from Italy, and they executed. Garage technicians modified the parameters under the argument of an optimization suggested by remote analysis. But what the algorithms interpreted as a potential improvement in the dynamic reality of the circuit was a technical disaster. Here, one of the greatest current tensions within Ferrari is revealed. On the one hand, you have the track team with engineers like Adami who live every second of a Grand Prix weekend, who understand how the curved car responds after curve and how it interacts with its driver's pilot style. On the other, a group of engineers in Maranello who do not smell the rubber, who do not feel the vibration of the car when something is not right, but that have the power to reconfigure a car from their analysis stations in real time. This disconnection is dangerous, not only because of its technical consequences as we saw in Zandvoort, but for what it reveals on the current Ferrari operating model. A house divided between the digital and the real, between the algorithm and human intuition. In addition, there is a political component that cannot be ignored. The Central Performance Group responds directly to high controls within Ferrari. It has privileged access to the technical directorate and enjoys an internal influence that has been a reason for debate in multiple internal meetings, according to sources close to the team. Some within the paddock have described it as a parallel structure that is eroding the authority of career engineers. And here the big question arises: how can a pilot like Hamilton, which depends on absolute trust with its engineer, compete at the highest level when there is an invisible force that can alter that relationship without prior notice? How can a team aspire to the championship when its operational decisions are not unified, but divided by two poles that do not always communicate correctly? What happened in the Netherlands was no exception, but the first major warning signal. Ferrari wanted to compete in the data era, but has forgotten that in Formula One human sensitivity, track experience and real-time communication between pilot and engineer are still irreplaceable. Zandvoort undressed that weakness. He showed that Ferrari has within himself a fight for control, among those who are in the pit wall making decisions under pressure, and those who operate from the comfort of a server in simulator's room, believing to have the absolute truth because his analysis says it. What Riccardo Adami denounced was not just a technical betrayal. It was an alarm signal about the internal imbalance that can cost Ferrari not only races, but its reputation and viability as a champion team. And meanwhile, the question is suspended in the air: how many more decisions will this group make in the shadows before the rest of the team says enough? What happened in the 2025 Grand Prix goes beyond a simple bad technical decision. It goes beyond a human error or a bad weekend. This was a deep symptom of a silent disease that has been brewing within Ferrari. A structure that, instead of cohesioning efforts between engineers, pilots, and technical departments, seems to be dividing, facing itself. And in the center of all this there is a figure that cannot go unnoticed: Lewis Hamilton. A pilot who does not need to demonstrate anything, who has won everything that can be won in this sport, but who has decided to embark on one of the most complex missions of his career: return Ferrari to the top. But no pilot, however big, can do that alone. And much less if the foundations of the equipment fall apart from within. Riccardo Adami's complaint is not an act of rebellion, it is a scream of relief. A warning that should force Ferrari to stop and reflect. Are they building a team to compete for championships, or are they feeding a dysfunctional system based on centralized control, unilateral decisions, and internal distrust? In a sport where the thousands of second-defined destinations, the egos, political agendas, or opaque structures cannot be allowed to condition what happens on the track. And this is where the audience enters. Because beyond the show, beyond the emotion of seeing a career on Sundays, this type of stories connects us with the true essence of sport: human struggle, the vulnerability of the system, the fragility of trust. Therefore, now is your turn. Do you think Hamilton will take control of the internal chaos and transform Ferrari from the inside as he did in his day with Mercedes? Or will it be another name in the list of talents that were lost in Maranello's political tangle? Should Ferrari dissolve the Central Performance Group or find a more balanced way to integrate it with the track team? So leave your opinion in the comments.